From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for the MTN News at 10 on Q2. I'm Russ Riesinger. Billings voters coming out in support of local schools, passing the elementary mill levy convincingly, it appears. The levy will help with day-to-day cost of elementary schools, providing money for heat, lights, people, and maintenance. It will also add around $25 to your property tax each year for a house worth $250,000. Those numbers aren't official yet. There were some ballots that were hand-delivered that won't be counted until tomorrow, so this will change a little. But as you can see, 16,188, or about 55%, voting for it, and 13,437, or about 45%, voting against it. I talked with Billings School Superintendent Greg Upham tonight, who told me he's super excited and humbled by the support from the community.
It's the number one issue other than safety, overall safety for our students and staff. It's a huge issue. We needed this. It'll help us immensely. Moving forward, we can begin to dig ourselves out of the deficit and continue to support children.
And while Billings voters said yes to the levy, Elder Grove's general fund levy has failed, however, with almost 70% voting against it. Elder Grove also deciding on two trustees, Kelly Cakes leading the votes with Nathan Zito in second and Michael Laird a close third. It was lights out late this afternoon after a severe storm ripped through the area spanning from Laurel to Pompey's Pillar. These are some viewer photos from the hail that fell throughout the area. Warden had some reports of baseball-size hail, while Huntley reported quarter-size hail. Yellowstone Valley Electric Cooperative had 1,800 homes without power at its peak around 5:30 this evening, while the Northwestern Energy outage map showed hundreds without power in the Billings Heights. Yellowstone Valley Electric has now restored all power. Yellowstone Valley Electric CEO and General Manager Brandon Whitman said there were some down power lines due to falling trees, but all in all, he says he's thankful because it could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a whole lot worse, and we kind of dodged a bullet too, because typically these storms, when they start in the west like that, they go all the way across our system from east to west, all the way down to Custer. Well, as this one went across and got to about the Warden area, it kept moving north, and so it sort of left our system, and we definitely dodged a bullet there.
All right, turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire. It was a quick-moving storm, offered a little bit of everything, including some possible tornadoes.
Oh, yeah, there were some tornadoes, one by Winnett and another one by Grass Range tonight, and that was seen by some highway patrolmen, so that's what we had. Yeah, it was an interesting night. As you can see, here's the good news now. Most of all the severe stuff has moved out of the region, so it is all gone, and what is left for us, well, it looks like some pretty nice weather coming our way, but let me show you what we got out of this thing. Here's the storm reports, and as you can see, there were a bunch of them, and let me show you some of the bigger ones. We had 2.5-inch hail diameter at Roundup, 2 inches at Shepherd. You had 175 at Broadus, and also Lavina. Winnett had the 1.25-inch size hail. Also had 55-mile-per-hour winds at Laurel and Tigan. That's where we had the one tornado there by Winnett. Meanwhile, let me show you what 2.5-inch hail looks like. That's tennis ball size hail. 2 inches like a hen egg. Golf ball is like 175, and ping pong ball, that's like 1.5 inches. So yeah, that's what we had tonight. It looks like all that stuff is over and gone, and we're looking at some smoother weather coming our way. We'll have more about that in a few more minutes coming your way.
Thank you, Bob. Tonight, a Billings long-term care facility is in quarantine because of COVID-19, and Governor Bullock is putting out an emergency order because of it. 58 people in all, 43 residents and 15 staff members have tested positive so far at the Canyon Creek Memory Care Community on Billings West End. 2 of the residents are in the hospital tonight. How COVID-19 got into the facility on Billings West End remains a mystery, much like the virus itself. But one thing is very clear, it's highly contagious and especially dangerous for older people with underlying conditions.
Older people tend to have multiple underlying chronic disorders that make it more difficult. And I think the other piece, particularly in a memory care facility, is people who have significant cognitive impairment can't follow the instructions of keeping your distance and washing your hands and wearing a mask. So they're at very high risk to get the disease. And once they get it, they're at very high risk for severe disease and high risk of death.
The owner of Canyon Creek says protocols were put into place back in mid-February to prevent exposure to COVID-19, limiting visitation and monitoring staff. Governor Bullock addressed the situation this afternoon.
Canyon Creek could decline participation when we encourage sentinel testing. Every single assisted living facility should be conducting sentinel testing. So the purpose of this rule is to help prevent what's happened at Canyon Creek moving forward.
The governor plans an order this week making that testing mandatory for visitors to be allowed in senior facilities. Visitations are already on hold in Yellowstone County after positives in a number of senior facilities last week.
I know a lot of people are still thinking that it's not that big a deal, but I think when you look at what we talked about over and over, the risk of getting in vulnerable populations, how quickly it can explode in that type of population.
Well, along with the 58 positive tests at Canyon Creek, 33 people, mostly staff, tested negative, and they're still awaiting tests on another 24 staff and residents. Well, both the state and Yellowstone County smashing records as the total active cases stands at 516 tonight. Yellowstone County surpasses Gallatin County in total cases, now has more than 2 times the number of active cases. Yellowstone County at 199, Missoula County 58, Gallatin County 54, and there are 27 active cases in Bighorn County. So far, more than 105,000 tests have been performed. And even with the sharp increase in Yellowstone County, Bighorn County health authorities tonight say their county remains the hot spot in the state. The latest data shows Bighorn County has more than 3 times the total number of cases and active cases per capita of Yellowstone County. The county has recently been averaging between 2 to 3 new cases each day, with a total of 22 new cases in this first week of July. Well, last week, both the governor's office and the state superintendent of schools released guidelines for how Montana public schools can reopen this fall. School officials, however, had already come up with their own guidelines and say they'll consider all 3 plans as they move forward. MTN's Mike Dennison has more.
Local school districts in Montana will make the call on how they plan to reopen this fall and are likely to have some forms of kids back in the classroom with face-to-face learning. But school officials say it won't be business as usual.
You may be coming back full bore. I don't believe that it's going to look like that. I think that there's probably going to be a blend of remote delivery of education services if they come back to the classroom in select and smaller groups.
Miller says many schools have been surveying parents and school staff on what it will take to make them feel safe. For those who don't feel comfortable being at school among larger groups of people, online classrooms will have to be available. And in-person learning will probably look different too, especially in larger urban districts.
If you've got a group of 30 students together, don't slice that deck and resort it 6 or 7 times a day, or you will not be able to track who saw who and who was in proximity to whom, and you won't have an effective way of isolating the impact of a positive COVID infection.
That means kids may be in one classroom for most of the day, with different teachers coming to them for different subjects. For classes not everyone takes, like foreign languages or advanced placement, those may go online only. There's also consideration of having half the kids coming to classrooms for part of the week and the other half the rest of the week, and remote learning when they're not at the building. School officials also say you'll see lots of cleaning of facilities and other preventative steps, like temperature checks.
Presence of any type of mitigation is going to be throughout every school day and every school. You're just not going to be able to walk into school and not notice it.
Schools are on a tight timeline with perhaps 30 days to finalize their plans. School officials say one thing the public can do to make their job a little easier is take precautions to stem the spread of the disease so the numbers decrease between now and the start of the school year. They're also saying anything approaching normal at Montana Public Schools appears a long ways off. And we haven't even talked about one other aspect. How much more is this new normal at Montana schools going to cost? One estimate places it at $70 million for this coming year. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Now, Montana has almost 500 separate school districts serving nearly 150,000 students. A 21-year-old man killed in an overnight shooting in the Billings Heights has now been identified. Preston Greger of Billings was shot in the chest just after 11:30 last night in the 600 block of Samuel Court. Lieutenant Brandon Woolley says the shooter, a 52-year-old man, was interviewed and released. Detectives are trying to determine if Greger was also seen just minutes before the shooting walking in and out of traffic on Main Street intoxicated. Case is currently classified as a homicide as the investigation moves forward. Well, we know that nationally, fireworks sales were up this 4th of July, and for a lot of people here in Billings, it seemed like there were more fireworks being set off around town than before. Despite this, the Billings Police Department and the Billings Fire Department reported that this holiday weekend didn't differ very much from years past. Billings Police told Q2 that overall calls to them on the weekend were down from where they were last year, and they only had 6 more calls relating to fireworks than they did in 2019. There was only 1 citation given for fireworks, and the fire department reported an even quieter weekend. All fireworks-related calls were either canceled shortly after they came in or amounted to be nothing there found at the scene. A grizzly bear ripped its way through coolers, a tent, and other unsecured food storage in West Yellowstone, forcing the temporary closure of a campground last week. Tonight, MTN's Cody Boyer takes us to West Yellowstone to show us how that bear will not only survive, but will also educate.
Now, while this is not the bear that did go through Rainbow Point Campground last week, this one is Nakina. This one's been here a little bit longer, and you can get a grasp of the enclosure that bear will have, as well as some of the opportunities. According to FWP, the stars aligned to make this possible.
This is a rare option when it comes to dealing with problem bears.
He was a bear with a knack for getting into places where he didn't belong, from an unsecured garbage can at a home to Rainbow Point Campground.
Within that campground alone was able to access food in an unsecured cooler, as well as some food and some garbage in the back of a pickup truck.
FWP Information Officer Morgan Jacobson says, well, he didn't stop there.
The bear also toppled a tent that was there that was unoccupied, and then climbed on a vehicle that was occupied while people were sleeping.
But with a nose like a grizzly, Jacobson reminds us the bear is not to blame.
All these unsecured food and attractant sources were the root cause of the problem.
The U.S. Forest Service and FWP acted quickly, using traps to capture the bear. That's when the bear got lucky and found a rare space at the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center.
They happened to have space there. The stars kind of aligned to make that happen, but it isn't always an option. In fact, most of the time, it is not an option, and we have to euthanize the bear.
But now the bear gets to help, alongside Nakina and the other 7 bears at the center. Oh, check that out. Playing in the water. The bear with a particular set of skills will now get a chance to put his skills to use. The center will safely test food storage containers using the bears in the spring. The Rainbow Point bear will get a chance to do the same, but Jacobson again says this isn't usually the case.
Usually, unsecured food sources lead to human safety risks, property damage, and a dead bear.
In West Yellowstone, Cody Boyer, MTN News.
Food storage orders are firmly in place per Forest Service regulations between March 1st and December 1st. As for the bear, he'll slowly start to meet the others in coming weeks. Still to come on tonight's 10 o'clock news, Jeff Choate, all about winning on the field, is now doing his part to make sure we can win against COVID. We'll explain. And in sports, Q2's Athlete of the Week rides bulls, snowboards, and a unicycle. We'll meet him coming up.